Hey, Skalds and Shadows, welcome to episode 3. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching our interview with Frederik Ehmke. We'd like to thank him so much. Just got off the road and he gave us a full hour of his time to chat late in the evening. We cover everything from his early work to what's happening with demons and wizards a little bit. We touch a little bit on Legacy of the Darklands, so you're going to want to tune in at the very end for that. And, of course, he talks about his drum school, Drumworks, which, if you're a bard, whether you want to learn to drum or you're just starting out, it's a great opportunity to learn from the very best. I mean, when you think of the Blind Guardian catalog and the most complex works they've done, you're looking at stuff past Night of the Opera, like Night of the Opera being one of the toughest. You're looking at things like At the Edge of Time and Beyond the Red Mirror with their complexities. So it's a chance to learn from someone who's really got the experience in a wide variety of genres. Not to mention, if you are a drummer and you've been drumming for a while, specifically if you're going into a studio environment, we're talking about a guy who's recorded in a studio for literal decades, and is a huge influence on lots of people. Very technical drummer. Also, I mean, if you're going to a live venue, we're talking about a guy who's played anything from Vakken open air to clubs all over the world. So it's a great opportunity there as well. And for his price range, I doubt you'd be able to find anyone more qualified. So at least message him up, take a look. We've thrown a link to it in the description below, and check out his drum school. I highly recommend you do. Without further ado, here's episode 3 of Podcast from the Twilight World. Hello, guardians of the blind and travelers in time. I am your humble bard, and I welcome you to Podcast from the Twilight World. Today we are honored by the presence of the Keeper of Time himself, Frederik Ehmke of the Elect Four. Frederik, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for inviting me over.
My first question for you is, you've been drumming since you were 9 years old, right?
Yeah, roughly, yes.
Around that time, was that like a primary school thing, or was that like lessons you took outside of that? How'd that come about?
Actually, my passion started a little earlier, to be honest. When I was, I would say, 4 years old, I already started building drum kits on my own from old, what is a laundry detergent bins like that. They came in carton buckets in those days. And so I recorded myself on tape. Actually, I have a tape from that time when I was drumming on those self-built drum kits, which were inspired by real drum kits. So that's the kind of start. I started taking lessons, that's correct, around age of 9 or 10. And that was parallel to starting with the school big band, where I started as a percussionist and then later took over the drum chair. So that's pretty much the beginnings.
And at that time, did you have any major influences? I mean, 9 years old, I mean, you probably don't have a lot of exposure to different types of music, but surely there were some influences, eh?
Well, not really to be named by person. It's rather musical styles. Of course, since I mentioned we played big band stuff, so the big band leader gave me some tapes again about big band music. I pretty much listened to what was on the radio at that time. And by listening stuff on the radio, it was a little later, I would say it was maybe 11, 12-ish, that I discovered first techno, don't get me wrong on this here. And then I discovered it was a different show. It was that I later found out it was to be heavy metal. And I did not know what it is, but I liked the sound of it and liked the energy and the drumming and everything. So I definitely sat down each week when that show was on the radio and recorded on tape again. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that was a thing back in the day, to record everything on tape from the radio. And then later I found out about the style, and it's called heavy metal. And also via that show on the radio, I found my now band Blind Guardian.
That was my next question for you, actually. So you discovered them on the radio show, but what was your first album that you got of Blind Guardian?
It was I learned and listened to that interview of Marcus and Hansi when they introduced Somewhere Far Beyond. And I, for that reason, remember also my first two songs that I heard from Blind Guardian were A Journey Through the Dark and then the Bard song In the Forest. And those two songs made me run to the store the next day and buy the album. And then later, a couple of weeks later, I ran again to the store and bought the old CDs that were released so far. And then I waited very, very long to get the Imaginations from the Other Side album when it came out here in Europe.
Wow. So, you mentioned that Bard song. Was there a specific song that, like as fans, like for me, I think of like The Elder and stuff like that, stuff that really kind of touches me. Is there a song, like even now having played with them for, 14 years, is there still a song that kind of resonates with you like that you get a emotional connection to?
Yes, that might be. I mean, there's a lot of songs. For some strange reason, it's the cover version of Two Friends from the Forgotten Tales album that I found very touching and really got me. And for the typical regular Blind Guardian songs, it was always the most moving song was always The Past and Future Secret, and it still remains to be one of my favorite songs, either to listen to or also to play live. So that's always special. Always special to play that song.
Like that. Okay. Now you're also a piper as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? And a flautist, but you're also a piper.
I am.
Is that Uli?
Thanks to Blind Guardian also.
Oh yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, it was actually I like the sound again on Somewhere Far Beyond. When the piper is calling is kind of cool, but then when it was mixed with metal in Somewhere Far Beyond, there's this middle section with the bagpipes, and I loved that. And later on, discovered bands like In Extremo, which is a German medieval metal band, and others. And then some soon-to-be friends of mine asked me if I wanted to join them into a medieval metal band. And I remembered that sound and wanted to also play something with that sound. So I immediately said yes. And we actually were together for a couple of years, I think around about a decade or something, and did a lot of stuff together. And I learned how to play the bagpipe extra for that band, which was inspired by Somewhere Far Beyond. And now that I'm playing Blind Guardian, first thing to do was, of course, bring back the bagpipes especially on the first album. I had, I think, two parts. Oh no, there was flute and bagpipes, and then there was another bagpipe part in the next album. And yeah, I mean, when it applies, I could, of course, offer. But I was very happy to bring it back to the band as something that comes from me and to make the band sound richer again.
Speaking as another piper, I'm quite happy you did. Now, that was your medieval band. You were also in a Pink Floyd cover band, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, I still am. Yeah, good research. Awesome. Actually, is it next week that I play two shows again with them? So I'm looking forward to that. And I started with them playing in '99 as a little extra. Actually, started by I knew one of the guys, the guitarist and singer. I knew him from, I don't know, rehearsal rooms. You hang out with a local musician crew. And then when I started my studies for jazz and popular music, and so far had only played with metal and rock bands, and wanted to kind of improve my horizon of jazz when it comes to this jazz direction. I was looking for people to play with, and so I remember that guy was playing blues and some jazz. So I called him and asked, would you be in for doing some jazz, and are you looking for a jazz drummer? And he said, no, but we're looking with my Pink Floyd band, we're looking for a drummer. And I said, okay, yeah, well, it's dynamic and it's still swingy and better than nothing. So let's start with it. And yeah, it lasted till today. And unfortunately, I had to take some major breaks when going on tour with Blind Guardian, because I don't want to take those guys off the road for 1.5 years or so. And I cannot do like double booking, that they make gigs and gigs with Blind Guardian. Don't want to get anybody into to trouble, even not even myself. So I
Well,
think the
probably a
easiest
good
was to
love.
find a sub for those times, and yeah, so that works out pretty nicely now that I'm on the road. Somebody else is playing with them, and when I'm available, I play. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, where can the bards that are watching this, especially the ones I guess located in Germany, is probably where those shows are. Hey, so where can we find out some more information about that?
Well, we have a homepage. It's called www.interstellar slash no not slash minus overdrive.de, and there you find everything about concerts. It's pretty much as you said in Germany. Maybe there's the one or other video, and also on YouTube there might be some fan videos posted of the coolest shows. We were actually thinking of releasing a live DVD something, but I think it kind of failed when it came to the rights and copyright stuff, and it was a little tricky with Pink Floyd stuff for DVDs. I think not quite sure on that, but yeah. So we had nice recordings for that, but they unfortunately have not been published yet. So, but there's some fan footage that people were filming, and if you just Google the name or search for it on YouTube, you pretty sure find something.
Ah, cool. Okay.
Maybe it's videos without me, but there are for sure some with me also.
Well, and of course, we'll so for the bards that are interested in it, we will throw a link in the description down below so that people can go and check it out for you. Now, the other band, you're in Interstellar, you're in the medieval band, and then Sinbreed comes in. When does that happen? What's the formation of Sinbreed?
Yes, I cannot recall actually the year. I think it must be around about 2008. Wow, I have to look it up. It's like really, I'm not really good with years, and time flies anyway, the older you get. Um, so it's just a friend of mine, Flo, asked me. He said he always wanted to have a metal band, and he was ever since he was listening to music and playing guitar, he was by himself, and was his biggest dream. And before he turned 30, he wanted to have his metal band if I would like to be in it. And it turned out during those talking about the band that he had my number already when we both were like around about 13. It was the formation of my first metal band, and he had my number to call me that he got from a contact, and he never dared to call me back in the day. And now that circle closed too, and so yeah, I mean, I like the ideas that he had, and the first album was pretty much his material, and it was so his project, and he just gathered people around him to record stuff with him, and then kind of evolved into Sinbreed, what it is today. We had some changes in the singer, in guitarist Marcus from Blind Guardian joined in for one record and joined out. It was kind of was too
Shadows, right?
yeah, for Shadows exactly.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I had a question on that too, actually, because you're juggling two bands at this point. One thing that stands out to me is when Worlds Collide, which is an awesome release by Sinbreed. That's about 4 months between At the Edge of Time, right? So, what were the challenges you faced, kind of juggling both those bands around that time period?
The cool thing about Blind Guardian is that we have a lot of time for production. And the cool thing about drumming is that you start the production with the drums. So when I record, there's usually round about a year for the other guys to finish their recordings and the mix and the mastering and all that stuff. So when I'm done recording Blind Guardian, I could easily record another production. And since we talked about the songs beforehand, that was not that big of a deal, and I was in the run of recording anyway. So just sit down for the next production a couple of months later and record that stuff, and the other guys don't take as long because also the music is not as demanding as the Blind Guardian stuff. It's simpler and rougher, and so it's quicker to produce.
Okay.
Therefore, that works.
So, is there a principal songwriter like there is in Blind Guardian, in Sinbreed?
I would say not anymore. It used to be Flo. who came up with the idea of Sinbreed and the concept and writing the first songs and the first album, pretty much. But already on Shadows, we have ideas of other band members, and I think everybody contributed at least one or two songs. So, and that concept, I think, fortunately, kept alive till the latest release last year. It's like round about that. Everybody donates pretty much or offers a couple of songs, and then we pick the coolest ones for the album.
Okay.
I think very cool because it actually delivers that band feeling and also a little more variety of sound and ideas that is not all really exactly the same stuff.
Different tastes, right?
Yeah, different approaches. Everybody receives and listens to music differently and writes music differently. And of course, I, as a drummer, have a totally different approach than, let's say, a keyboardist or a bass player.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
So that leads to different results.
Now, of course, you guys released four. The Roman numerals I and V. You released that back in November, right? But
yes.
There was a key. You touched on it before, but Nick took over from Herbie.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, it occurs to me that Herbie seems to be quite low, like a baritone, and Nick is like a tenor. So, was there any issues with key changes? Did you need to write in a different key or change the arrangement to meet that?
Well, especially the writing. I mean, usually people offer pretty much the riff, and then the vocalist offers maybe a line that he is sounding good at. I always like to already come up with ideas for vocals, but then they usually get also worked over for really fitting into the nice range of the voice. So in that case, I pretty much did nothing different, and we are open for changing things. Like it's a rough idea, and this is called the songwriter who comes up with a rough idea, but then at this point, everybody jumps in and improves on their special technical field. So when it comes to drumming, of course, nobody offers a full arranged drum track. It's of course a rough idea of, okay, we have halftime or double time, or here's a break, and there we want a little bit like a tribal tom part or something. But that's a rough sketch. And then, of course, the instrumentalist comes up with the detailed arrangement for that part, and everything else makes no sense in my opinion. So, and the same counts for the vocal. So if I offer a vocal line and say, no, Nick, you have to sing exactly what I dictate you, this is not going to sound very nicely in the end. And so everybody tries to work on getting the best product in the end.
Okay, and so, it seems like I think I read an interview from you guys after the departure of Herbie, saying that when you did 4, you kind of kept some of the same elements that Sinbreed's known for. But I noticed, I think it's the song is "At Least I Am." I noticed a very distinct difference in that song. It almost had a little more harshness to it. Like, he did a great job of keeping melody in it as well, but there's almost a little more harsh vocal to it. Is that something that you guys are branching into?
Was an experiment that Nick came up with this idea, and we all liked the new color. Of course, it's not we're not a growling band usually. It was just like for that part, it sounded really cool and interesting for being different. And he said also he didn't do it before, so it was also new and kind of struck him to do it. It was just a momentary event, I think. And well, I now I cannot even imagine the song without the growl part. Yeah, and they were also like from the songwriting. Don't forget that Manu, for instance, was not in the songwriting before, so he also brought in some new sounds. And I think the whole album has a very positive vibe. When you listen to the whole songs, they all very positive and giving positive energy somehow. And I think people start calling that white metal, which was never our intention to do white metal, but people call us to do white metal. Maybe also some lyrics could be related to that genre, but it was never our intention. And if people want to consider us to be white metal, then they they are fine. I'm not denying that, but I can only say we never intended to be. That's not on purpose. If you call it us
Book
that.
of Life versus the Purge, sort of. you
Yeah,
know.
Book of Life. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, of course. But you can interpret it everything into, let's say, Bible topics. You find those because it's. I mean, now we are at a very different part of the conversation. But if we talk about the Bible, of course, that deals with human life topics, and there must be, of course, parallels. If we write songs about life, and actually, it's more about, I would say, the struggling of good against evil, which is also part of the Bible stories, the good old traditional fantasy topics. This is more what we had in mind as overall inspiration. So
I could see that though, but I like to hear you say that people consider it more white metal. It kind of surprises me. I mean, like there's definitely the undertones of that, but when you listen to like Shadows, for example, we were just talking about, a lot of the lyrical references is quite aggressive.
yeah,
Um, it's much different than that. So
yeah,
it kind of surprises me in that.
yeah. Like I wrote a song called "At the Gate," and it's pretty much about the situation of passing from one dimension, from one life into the afterlife. Like this thing uh, is totally not Bible inspired, but of course also like this is a religious topic. What happens after death? What is going on then? And yeah, if people want to interpret it as that, and everybody finds, I guess, their part in everybody else's music. It's like a self-reflection. I think when you listen and interpret music, you always reflect of yourself, and what you want to see and what you want to find gets amplified, I think. So there's
Well
nothing wrong with
said.
that. Sorry, I have to move a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. So we were talking about writing with Sinbreed and how it's sort of a now it's become more of a community effort, right? Like it's every member kind of contributes a bit. How does when you're coming up with a beat, how does that differ from like how do you separate what is a blind guardian beat as opposed to Sinbreed beat?
Hmm. Funny. I might be not a typical songwriting drummer then, because I usually don't start with thinking of a drum beat to write a riff or come up with an idea, since I'm also piano player and keyboardist and stuff like that. So I rather play and think in a way of of a keyboard player. So I have a keyboard which actually allows me to play on a keyboard as on a guitar. So I simulate the guitar sound on a keyboard, which works nicely for me. So I still think as a melody player or a harmony player, and not as a drummer in that moment. And usually the drums um, try to bind the rhythmic or sometimes even melodic information that you find in the basic idea that comes from the guitars. Um, I don't know, for some reason I like also that way of working. Sometimes there's cool grooves, of course, that I come up with or suggest, hey, let's do something with that. But in the most cases, it's actually starting thinking of melodies, thinking of maybe guitar riffs, and then the song grows out of that, and then kind of in the end, it's maybe parallel to that, but it's definitely not the first thought. The drums come in and
Okay.
support what is there, or kind of point out what is there.
So yeah, because you wrote Holy Grail, right? Or you have a credit for Holy Grail on Beyond the Red Mirror, right?
Yeah, there was the basic. There was one of those things that I came up with a basic version of that song, and then same with Blind Guardian. Then we throw it in the pool, and then everybody comes up with some improvements and ideas. And of course, with Hansi's very special own way of singing, I could not really um, write all singing for him, and this is something that he has to do. And also Andre comes up with some extra melodies and stuff that is his typical sound and his typical way of writing songs. Um, if you left that out, you would not have a Blind Guardian song, in my opinion. So it's always they have to have an impact on it. Of course, Marcus has also his say in the rhythm guitar, so not forget about him.
Oh
Just
yeah.
saying for in general, like the typical sound is, I think, made by the melodies, and this is definitely Andre and Hansi for that part, and therefore they, I think, give the special Blind Guardian touch to it.
Yeah, I mean, like, and it's interesting because whenever we hear, whenever the bards hear of how songs are written by blind guardians, very much that way. But one thing that stood out to me was I think it was an interview during the time of At the Edge of Time.
Mm.
Um, Hansi and Andre described a sort of balance of power between you, Charlie, and Marcus being the kind of deciding factor. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Well, okay, actually, I would not have described it in that way. I would have said that we have like this idea, the basic idea that usually comes from the two main songwriters, and then at that point that you have an idea, that everybody tries to offer um, their let's say interpretation of the idea. So in the case of the drums, to get a little more precise, that would mean that there's a basic guitar riff, let's say, and there's maybe some lines in the chorus from the vocals, and then there's of course a already idea of a demo drums. That means when, let's say, Andre programmed some basic ideas down, and they are there. So it's like a rough sketch, what I said before. And then now, for instance, Charlie has his way of interpreting what could be done from there. And I do, of course, my arrangement. And we do that actually independent from each other to not be. I actually don't listen to the demo drums at all, to be totally free and come up with what I would contribute. And then we have like a discussion, sitting down, comparing those versions and coming up with the one that makes the most sense and has maybe the most red line and supports the most what is happening and the song idea. And of course, in the end, there's a decision of everybody, but it has also, yeah, it has to please everybody.
So
And yeah.
with that model, then how are ties like dispute? Because I imagine there's probably like not everyone agrees on everything all the time, right? So how are
Yeah,
ties settled?
I would say personally, if somebody writes a song and has a person has a creative input and has a idea and a vision of what the song was supposed to sound like, this voice counts a little more than the ones who are simply contributing ideas. Um, but actually, it doesn't happen very often that we discuss very long about um, basic parts. Of course, details can be something else, but like in general, we are of the same opinion of how to have. I mean, there was one thing that I was totally different than, for instance, what Andre envisioned. For instance, it was a Grand Parade from the last album.
Really?
Pretty ambitious song, and I felt it has, since it's a, for all the music theory fans out there, it's a 6/8 or 3/4 ish meter, which is not very common in metal, and I felt the song had a very strong potential for being turned into a more progressive way, where you play with two different meters that kind of change permanently, and you go from one to another. And I had a very, in my opinion, interesting arrangement that totally was progressive, and I thought it was like very cool for that song, and was totally consequent with metric modulation and whatnot. and it was just not straight enough to what he had envisioned, and then in the end it turned out to be like that kind of straight version, which I guess fans find more convincing, and it's definitely more the Blind Guardian sound. I just found it interesting to just look in an isolated way at that song. I found it very interesting to do from a musical theory point of view. Maybe I would have stuck out a lot from the rest of the songs of the album.
Is there a chance of getting a demo version of that? Like, will we get a when Beyond the Red Mirror eventually is re-released? Will we get a demo version in that arrangement?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to look up where my demo version still is, on which computer, which hard disk. It's so long ago. So
Yes, yeah.
in theory, we sometimes dig in old material and find old demo versions that are interesting to be released. I would not say categorical no, but for now I have not thought about that. It could be interesting, but pretty much it is the drums that are different, but it's of course a different feel to the whole song then.
I mean, that can change an entire arrangement. I was talking with Hans-Peter Frey, and we were discussing the difference between the Battalions of Fear demo versus some of the songs that are on the first album, and there's a totally different feel just from having a different drum arrangement in it. You know?
Yeah, the feel will definitely change because the drums are, of course, creating the overall flow and the overall pulse of a song. And since I was playing with the pulse a lot, that of course gets and must lead to a very different feel. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Think of Dream Theater meeting Blind Guardian, then you're there. Yeah, well, was my two favorite bands when I was teenager, so there was my main inspirations, and therefore I went in that direction, I guess.
Well, and so Blind Guardian and Dream Theater being such a huge inspiration for you in that way. Everyone knows, of course, that you were a fan, so I'm not gonna tie you down with a bunch of questions on that. But I've been curious. From a fan standpoint, when did that transition? Like, is there a distinct memory you remember from when you became a fan, who had been a part of the band, to an actual member of Blind Guardian? Like, was there a point when that all clicked and you felt like an actual member as opposed to just, I'm here playing with Blind Guardian?
Unfortunately, no. It was more like a development. It was a kind of nice development of a series of good news, like in the voice of Professor Farnsworth from Futurama. Good news, everyone. So it started with me applying for the job when I first heard that Tom left the band. And I was just done with my studies, and I just had my exam and graduation, and was looking to how to plan my musical life. And then I heard of that news, and I was like, hey, why not ask for it? I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the songs, never played one, but I'm familiar with what they sound like, and I know all the back material, and I definitely know the songs, knowing the songs. And so I just tried to find a contact, and that was the first good news, because it was mere chance that I found Andre in the phone book, which was a mistake. Should not have happened, but I found his number, looked it up, and called him. And second good news that I know now, knowing how hard it is to get him on the phone. On my first call, I had him on the phone, and now that I actually am allowed to call him pretty much all the time, it's very hard to get him on the phone. Was a very lucky coincidence. Was a very lucky coincidence, and incredible. And I'm not very persistent. If that would have failed, and well, I tried, and then went on to something different. Not being too sad about it, and like, well, life goes on. It was clear like this. Do something else then. So that worked out, and then I sent them the material. I went to a studio, recorded 3 songs, and sent that in. And then they called me back and said they wanted to work with me on the studio to see how how my creative input works like, and what I would do with the new material, what my ideas would be for that stuff. So I went there for a weekend in the studio and worked on 2 songs, pretty much by myself, not interrupted, no disturbed by anyone. Just was locked into the studio, and they un- unleashed me then at night. Uh, no, Andre came by and like we talked about a little bit of the ideas, and he was right away kind of showing how much he liked it, and creative process was checked then, and then they invited me over again to record those ideas under real studio circumstances, and with Charlie, and that worked out pretty well too. And then I think it was one night before my birthday, they called me and said, actually, don't tell anyone yet, but you're in the band. I was like, oh, can I tell it on my birthday party? He's like, yeah, and the birthday party's okay, but just don't spread the news before we do.
Well, good. I guess good advice.
There was maybe the moment that it gets closest to what you were describing, and then pretty much from then on, my birthday is end of June, and then from July I was in the studio because they were just happy that I called on time to still keep up with the timeline for the studio production, which was already really at stake. And yeah, they were not sure which drummer is gonna record the stuff. And as I said beforehand and earlier, it's the drums who start the production. So without the drums, you cannot do anything.
Okay. So was it a challenge to learn all this stuff in Twisted Myth so quickly?
Yes, for sure. And I kind of lived in the studio, or nearby the studio, of course, but spent all days and weeks there. Had a practice kit set up to practice the stuff, and it was not that much the, let's say, coordination and the material to be learned. It was more the sound that I had to learn. Because nobody told me before that as a metal drummer you have to be really loud and energetic. I always thought it's just placing the right stroke at the right time, and I had very good, I think, technical background already from my studies and from my playing in metal bands before, so that was not the big deal. And I had also the knowledge of understanding when Charlie talked to me and said, hey, this fill was cool, can you now play it exactly the same, but you, instead of the second tom, you start on the snare drum. And this is stuff that I easily can do because I'm used to that pattern thinking and modular thinking, and that was a big advantage, and helped a lot. It was just really the sound, and also getting those song structures, which are pretty intense, into let's say, get them down that you are able to play the song in a row for a recording. You know, you can only record a song properly when you are able to play like a sort of a live version of it, that you know which part is coming next. You cannot really stop every time, oh, what's coming next now. Even though it would work from the technical side, it just doesn't work from the acoustic side. You hear if somebody is like, you hear the intention of where you want to go to.
Okay. So, we talked about earlier that you wrote on the Grail. How would you say your like, because you've contributed. Obviously, your role has changed a little bit since you first started when you were learning just their material to At the Edge of Time when you were active part of that, and then Beyond the Red Mirror when you actually contributed to it. How would you say your role has changed over the years?
It has actually not that much changed from the times at the Edge of Times. I already right away felt welcomed as a full band member, and they said, like, they left no doubt on that every member has the way of giving input to the band. It's just, I find it very hard to come up with something that in the end also sounds like Blind Guardian then, because the music has been written in that what's it called, constellation for years. before I joined the band, and now I come in. Of course, that brings new blood and new elements into it, but you can hear it, for instance, in Fly. You hear like those Southern American Latin rhythms. This is something new, of course, that has not been there before. Um, but the overall sound is, I think, you start with the guitars and you start with having an idea for the vocals, and then the rest comes in. And I, of course, would like to write some more, and I have some ideas in the back now, and it's just very hard to also find the times next to, like, I still have other obligations, like my drum school that keeps me kind of busy,
I was just
and
gonna say, how do you
yeah,
juggle
and
that with
other bands, and then it's really demanding time wise, and it's a very it's luxury to only have time for one band, and in this given situation, it's not, and having a family also
well,
um,
yeah.
is yeah, you have to be very genius in finding the time and working on those songs.
Oh, for sure. Um, Now, when you talk about your drum school, is that like, do you cover a wide range of it? Is it just theory? Is it, is it plain? Do you teach different styles? Can you tell us a bit more about drum works?
Well, it's basically my philosophy is to pick up the people where they are and try to improve what they want to do. So I really don't care about the styles. There's people coming to me, like, of course, many people come for metal skills, learning double bass, drumming, and all those like metal related fill-ins and stuff. But there's also people who come for a general education in drums. With some, I do even Lady Gaga or songs like that. Um,
Run the
it's
gamut.
it really depends. No, it's I enjoy music in all its varieties, and it's actually fun. It's definitely a difference of listening to music and also to play those songs, and it feels different. And I maybe the craziest was um, Gangnam Style. Somebody came with that request and like, hey, I want to do Gangnam Style. It's like, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'm not the one to say no, we're not doing that because I don't like the song or something. And then playing the song is actually fun. I cannot tell anything different. I was surprised and shocked myself, but it is fun to play music in all its varieties. And yeah, if somebody wants to jazz, can do that. And due to my educational background, it's should not be a problem for anything. And for the people who are further away, I actually offer online lessons
Okay.
via Skype, which is which also a nice addition for those who cannot really access my drum rooms, and still they got their one-on-one lessons.
It must get difficult though. Like, I mean, you're right now. You're touring with Demons and Wizards. You play, obviously you're playing Guardian, Sinbreed, and Interstellar Overdrive. When the mood's right. How is that? How does that affect your students? Are you able to, like? Is it like a reoccurring? Like, do you do reoccurring lessons, or is it like a curriculum? How does the structure of a lesson go?
Usually it's I find pretty much a way of getting it to work with each student. Mainly it's for the ones who come by, it's once a week, and they have their times. But then others are only interested in every other week because they are maybe a little further already, and if they, like, they know the exercises that they have to do, and they it's just enough to look at them every other week. And some are coming for a couple of lessons, but then once a month, for instance, because they come from further away, so they have a longer driving, and have like a session of four lessons in a row, but then once a month or once in 6 weeks or so. Or yeah, I mean, and then when it comes to the times that I'm on tour, as everybody knows, Blind Guardian is not always touring. We have also nice breaks in between the tours. um so I pretty much offer whenever I'm available. I offer lessons, and when I'm on tour, I'm on tour, and when I have to record, I of course am also gone. But yeah, for those people who are now with me, um, and that's definitely enough. They are very happy with my sometimes there, sometimes away um, schedules, and also they definitely benefit also from those experiences. Me being a professional and active musician, and not only talking about what how it's done. It's like they actually see I can provide the experience from playing live and in the studio, which is pretty rare. And I wished I would have had that back in the day. That somebody would have offered that. So that's is one of the reasons that I, of course, want to contribute and share my wisdom for the others.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity because you don't see a lot of, especially drummers of your recognition, going around and just offering lessons. But what do you say to the people who are, maybe a little nervous about approaching you because you are, a member of a really notable band, several notable bands. What would you say to people that are
Well,
hesitant because of nerves?
I would say we're all musicians, and especially when you learn how to play an instrument, there's nothing you should be shy about, especially not in front of a teacher who actually is there for working on problems or things that you cannot play. And I think a good teacher will find things that you are not capable of yet. And therefore, you should not feel embarrassed about that. And if you're perfect, a perfect drummer already, then you don't need lessons, and you don't need the advice, and you don't need the input. And I would say that counts for no one on this planet. So even I uh, can still ask other drummers for things, how they are doing them, and I'm interested in sharing and exchanging experiences. It's like it's maybe not called lessons then, but it's still sharing and talking about things that we have on our minds. And it's exactly the same thing when you're a student and try to approach an expert on, let's say, if you want to learn metal drumming, then why not learn from somebody who knows how it goes?
Absolutely. Obviously being bards, if they're coming to this channel, we're all Blind Guardian fans, so why not learn from the best, right?
Well, the best is not what I would say. Like for me, art is nothing you should compare. It's just you like it or you don't, or you like it a little bit, and this is pretty much what counts. And also maybe there's other drummers that are very skillful, some are very fast, but I would not dare to say this drummer is better than the other. I would say maybe I like his way of playing better, but the better drummer, it's not like Olympics that you measure um, who just broke the world record in, I don't know, double bass playing or something. That's not what I find musical.
No, and well said. I mean, coming from a fan perspective, of course, there's always going to be that drive, and like, we love Blind Guardian, so obviously Blind Guardian's got to be the best. But I think it shows a lot of the character that you're able to say, there is no best. It's all art,
No,
and it's in
no,
it's
it's
interpretation,
different.
right?
There's difference. At a certain level, you cannot really compare. And it's so much, I have so many colleagues that I admire and that I really say like I wished I could play like them, and I find it very inspiring to listen to them playing. And it's just different. It's just their way of playing, and therefore maybe is part of the fascination for me, because it's something that I find maybe tough, or it's not the first idea that would I have in my head for playing this and that fill, for instance. And then they come up with different ideas, and I find that very cool.
That's how music progresses, I guess, eh?
Exactly, exactly.
Now, speaking of other drummers, if we still got time, if you have a little bit of time yet, I'd like to touch base on demons and wizards if you're available.
Yeah.
So Bobby Jarzombek and of course Mark Prater are known as really, really accomplished drummers, and their stuff is, known by laymen's like myself who don't play drums as very difficult pieces. What would you say the hardest song was to learn? Because of course you're touring with demons and wizards. What was the hardest song to get
Hmm.
down?
We should differ in two categories, maybe three. First category is just high-end speed. and there we have a couple songs, for instance, Crimson King, Blood on My Hands, just the peak parts, which are insanely fast, which is 191 BPM on the longer time, which I performed in the studio, but it's still something different to play that live. So this is something to tackle. Then we have Endurance, which is, for instance, Terror Train. Is the speed is not as fast as Crimson King, for instance. It's only 176, I think, and but it's pretty much consistent double bass for 5 minutes. There's no real break in that, no relief from the power that you have to provide. So that's a different category of difficulty, I would say. And then there's the just coordination, to be able to, from a motoric skills, play those parts. And when I put all them together, I would say maybe it's Terror Train. It's very, very, it's a kind of fast song, powerful, and needs power, needs to the consistent power. You cannot get any weaker in there. And then it has like this very, very weird, let's call it pre-chorus part. The first melody part is as well, like with those weird toms. It took me a long time to actually get that down, like by transcribing and understanding what I hear, because it's so many layers of things that are happening. It's kind of freestyle interpretation, but also it has the feeling of being scripted. And I wanted to also provide that when I play that live, that it has the same feel, that it's kind of going back to the same elements again, but then also having a little freedom of improvisation for the fill-ins. And I think now I'm at a kind of okay part. And by the reactions of the guys, I think they called me Mr. Impossible, Mission Impossible. They were actually very happy that I did a kind of okay job on, especially that song. This is definitely the measurement. And then others, well, it's yeah. I mean, Heaven Denies is pretty tough, especially to start a show with.
No,
Yeah.
I haven't checked out the set list because I'm actually coming to see you guys up in Vancouver when you're coming down here on the North American leg. But I was curious because Touched by the Crimson King has never been played live up until the tour.
Mm.
There was no tour associated with it
Yes.
beforehand. Were there any songs that you guys weren't able to find the right mixture in order to bring to a live set, or have they all been pretty easy to bring over to a live venue?
Well, the two main guys came up with the set list and the selection of songs that we want to rehearse, and there was no song that we had to skip because of it being not playable, or we were not able to play it. So all the songs that were in the list are also ended up on our set list in the end, and that was kind of a cool thing, but maybe also a good proof of their judgment that they already selected some that are actually that we would be able to play. But I, from what I remember from the back catalog, I also have both albums, and I think the ones that we did not play or do not play, there's not that much complicated stuff that could be, let's say, dangerous, or that could be critical to be played. So I think we also have the best and also the most demanding songs. Oh, by the way, Dorian is also one of those who have very, very complicated bass drum patterns that I really had to practice for weeks, I would say, to get that one down. And
Now, I know that in an interview on Podcast in Stone, which is a Iced Earth podcast similar that my buddy Chuck Hoskins runs, he interviewed David Newman Stubbs, who did the redesign of the cover, and he said that the stage show for the North American tour was going to differ from the previous one. Now, is the set list going to change?
yeah, we were discussing that. We rehearsed a little more songs than we played in Europe. Um, yeah, I cannot really. I don't want to spoil any surprise or anything. And
Fair enough.
especially to be honest, I really don't know myself now. Um, if we talked about some ideas, brainstorming to have a little change of the set list, just be exciting for us also, and to have a little variety in there. And but of course, it's a little bit too early to talk about details. And I personally really hope that we have a little more songs to take turns with, um, to make it a little more interesting also for us, because I like having differences in the set list.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Especially, first and only North American tour. There's bound to be some surprises along the way, I'm sure. um,
Let's hope
now,
so. Hopefully some good surprises.
oh yeah. Well, I've got no doubt. It's got three of my boys on it, so we're we're good. But can you tell us? So obviously, Demons and Wizards is made up of Blind Guardian and Iced Earth. But have you guys noticed a difference in the crowds that attend a Demons and Wizards concert as opposed to, say, just a Blind Guardian one? Is there a difference in atmosphere?
um, it's really hard to judge audiences anyway, because I think every country pretty much has their own ways and their typical things that you and their atmospheres that comes from the crowd. Um, I would have said you notice optical differences because there's now people with Blind Guardian shirts and Ice Earth shirts, which was a little rarer beforehand. The Ice Earth shirts, that is. Um, Sometimes you see them. um, but I would say the reception, like as I think it's not a big secret anymore that we also play some Blind Guardian and some Iced Earth songs. And you see by the reception of those, you see that it's not that big of a difference if it's the one or the other band. I'm actually interested to see the States, which is definitely more Iced Earth territory. I'm looking forward to see the audiences there and the reactions there. I have, of course, already ideas in my head from what to expect from earlier Blind Guardian shows. Let's see if that image stays the same or if it's somehow different. I think the bands are still close enough, and the fan base of both bands have a lot of people in common. I cannot really see anybody saying I like Iced Earth but I hate Blind Guardian, or the other way around. Um, Maybe you tend to say I like this band more than the other, but not really excluding. And therefore, I think it's a very good mixture for Demons and Wizards to go on tour, and also having pretty much a nice mix of both bands in the lineup. That's, I think, a very, very cool and very unique and special thing. Because when I compare it to the tour that they did before for the very first record in 2000, I want that was like ages ago. There was a lot of guest musicians in the lineup that had nothing to do with the two bands, and now it's pretty much only. Oh, yeah, in the States it will be only Iced Earth and Blind Guardian, which is pretty cool.
I think that I mean that is really cool. And speaking of, we know that there's three albums coming up because of Hellfest, and I'm not sure how much you can talk about it, so don't give away anything that's going to incriminate yourself. But is there a chance of hearing an Imka drum beat to some of these new tracks on the new album?
I'm actually, to be honest, I came into the touring very late, so I am not involved in the Demons and Wizards production in general. Of course, I cannot tell of what the future might bring if they want to tour again. If they ask me again, I don't know. I just say, for now, I'm just the humble drummer for the tour, and made them or helped them to go on the road and do the touring. So the drumming has all been done before I joined the tour, and it's pretty much in the end of the end phase of mixing and mastering.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I won't dig too deep on it. But we hope to
But
see. I can say
since
from the bards at least. We
since
hope to
since
see.
we recorded some material for videos and stuff, you are able to at least see some of Ehmke parts in the video, even though it's maybe not that much of what you can recognize. But of course, they had to have a drummer, and since we were playing and rehearsing those songs, it's of course clear
You
that
hired Mr.
we were
Impossible, right?
they used me as the drummer for the video. No, I was happy to help out. It's fun. Video shoot is always special, and it was a very nice day. And yeah, I'm very excited to see the result, though. It's like a really
Oh,
ambitious project and takes some
I know
time,
that
though.
we are too. And speaking of exciting things on the horizon, I'd be remiss and shunned by my fellow bards if I didn't mention Legacy of the Darklands. Now, I know you guys took more of an arrangement stuff, and there's some stuff that you can't talk about. There's some stuff that you weren't involved with, but I've got a couple questions I was wondering if you might be able to shed some light on.
I can try. Um, yeah,
Okay. Oh shoot!
yeah.
All right. Well,
Let you know.
maybe we'll cut that part a little short.
Yeah.
I'll, I just have one specific question on it, and you might not be able to say any on this either.
Okay.
In December, Hansi kind of teased us a little bit with the track that is Harvester's Souls, track number 19 on the upcoming album. And I'm curious, there's been a lot of stuff thrown around, and the bards that watched my first video, we kind of dove into the possibilities of what those could be. And it seems like A Night at the Opera might be the strongest choice for where that song might have come from. Can you elaborate on that?
Actually, I unfortunately, um, no, I can't because I don't. No, seriously, I wished I could. I was not in the songwriting times. I wasn't around. They were like their songs were written times before I joined the band, and the whole process kind of took part in my breaks when there was no current Blind Guardian production, so they were testing out choirs and stuff, orchestras, rooms where to record. Of course saw the process and what happened and the results, and but I was never very involved in it. So I just every now and then get to listen a little bit of the uh, state of art. uh,
Fair
but
enough.
but
And
then yeah, I really details and inspirations, whatever, what it could mean, what it could be. That is definitely Hansi stuff, and I know that it also it came from a totally different approach. And I think it was back in the day was related to something um, like Tolkien related
Misty Mountains,
opus,
I believe.
and then it kind of changed into something that is based off this book of Marcus Heitz, that is like a corporation thing, and he wrote a story, and it kind of catches on in
Well,
our orchestral stuff.
and I'm just looking at my list, and I have a ton of questions on that too. But I know we are running short in time, so
Yeah.
I apologize to the bards. I asked for some community input, but selfish me, I took a little extra time on on the questions here. So, is there anything else you want to say before we head out? Is there any message you want to give to the Blind Guardian fans or potential drummers out there who might be interested in drum works?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, there's no like special message. It's always the same thing. I like everybody to enjoy music in their way, and I'm very very happy and feel very special and yeah, definitely feel special about that. That I'm in the lucky position of making music in a way that so many people are able to enjoy it and receive it. And this is definitely a very special situation, and I'm very happy about that. And I really can only hope for, um, yeah, all the people to see them on the road, come visit the concerts, or sometimes there's video streams if you want to stay connected for like the Wacken is next week, Wacken Festival here in Europe. It's a big thing, and there might be video streams that you can follow, and it's not really being there, but at least you're not missing out. And just
I'm sure Skulls and Shadows will be
just
watching.
enjoy, exactly. Just enjoy whatever you like, and if it's being active musician, of course, do your stuff, do it the way you want to do it. And if you're just receiving and consuming music, just don't be what's like judging others for their musical taste.
Well
Let
said.
everybody do what they want to do and listen to what they want to listen.
Well, I have to extend a huge thank you for coming on our little podcast here. I know you just got off the road, so it was a little inconvenient, but I
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking
You're
the
welcome.
extra time.
No worries.
And with that, Bards, this concludes another chapter of podcast from the Twilight World. With that, let's leave it to the memories and kiss them goodbye.
All right. Goodbye. Have a nice time.